why did they come here? How did they come here? So I'm going to ask you to, for a minute, put yourself, you're living on a farm in Pennsylvania in 1730, 1760. Your grandparents came to America. Your mom and dad are living in Pennsylvania or Maryland. There's no more land for you to farm, right? Agriculture is farming. There's not a lot of land. You're 33, 35 years old, you have a wife and a child, and you hear about the land opening up. And here, they called it Alabama fever, right? The land opened up, the country had fever for land, so those folks came here. All of them did not make the trip from Pennsylvania or Maryland at one time. Often it was a generational migration. They would come to North Carolina or Virginia, and then their children would move on. And those people came here. And who were they? They were Scots-Irish people, and they had a clan, I'll use the word governance, a clan society. They were loyal to their clan leader. They were defeated in battles, but they were never subjugated. They fought the English, of course, you know, for 2,000 years. The Romans couldn't defeat them, right? The Romans built the wall across the north of England to stay away from those barbarians. And so that's who they are. And they came here. They brought their culture with them. And if you married into a Scots-Irish family, I read that you became one of them, okay? They adopted you. And so over the last few months, I've read a couple of books that highlighted this and talked about it. One's the Great Wagon Road. Great Wagon Road started in Philadelphia, went south through Maryland, into Virginia, North Carolina, and eventually to Georgia. That was the main route of transportation. And another really highly interesting book, Born Fighting by James Webb. And you may have heard of James Webb. He ran for president in 2016. He was Secretary of Navy, and his family, Scots-Irish. And he talks about driving down Interstate 81. How many of you have driven Interstate 81 up to Washington? So you know it well. And you're driving into Virginia, and the Allegheny Mountains are on the right, Appalachians are on the right. You come down past the town of Abingdon. You come down past where Virginia Tech is, all those mountains. You come into the west of Virginia, and at that part, the Wilderness Road branches off from the Great Road. And the Wilderness Road goes west to the end of Virginia and then up into Cumberland Gap. And that was the gateway, of course, into Kentucky. And the folks that came to Alabama came that route. Now, instead of going through the Cumberland Gap, they came on down to Knoxville, or they came, you know, and they found their way down here. A long trip, you know, from Pennsylvania or Maryland is probably 10 weeks. So that 35-year-old man and his wife and child are leaving their home. They're bringing only their most important possessions. They have a child with them maybe, and they may never see their parents again, right? Just like when their ancestors came over and came to Annapolis, those folks never saw their families back in Ireland and Scotland. So we're going to talk about the people a little bit, then get into the cemeteries in Madison County. So what we see here on the upper left is Benny at one of his ceremonies where they dedicated a plaque to Revolutionary War veterans. And Benny tells me he thinks there are 171 Revolutionary War veterans in Madison County that you know of.
That are not necessarily buried here. Some of those came, they stayed a while and then moved farther west.
Okay.
We think overall that there was close to 125, 130 that probably ended up staying buried somewhere in this area.
And Benny and his team are busy almost every week refurbishing these graves, doing work in the Cornelius Cemeteries on the right top. That's an interesting cemetery off Bob Wade Lane that is, look at the stones there. You know, that's a pioneer cemetery. I've been in it one time. And you gotta ask the question, how did they get these 300-pound stones into these cemeteries? Well, they quarried them and they hauled them in a wagon. So it's a lot of work. So between the early 1700s and about 1780, 400,000 Scots-Irish came to America. And they were migrating just like they had done for centuries. They fought the English. The English would defeat them. They would move somewhere else. They were always moving on. They would not allow themselves to be subjugated and conquered. So they came to America and they settled in the Appalachians. Now, why didn't they go down in the low country in Virginia? Why didn't they take the best farms? Well, I read that the Virginia colonial government authorized only one religion, Anglican. That's Episcopal today, right? We know that as Episcopal. And the Scots-Irish Presbyterians, they weren't allowed to practice their religion. But they did let them go to the frontier. Why? To protect the state from the Indians. The Indian wars, a lot of massacres. So these Scots-Irish took the rough land, they went into the mountains, and that's where they are today. They're still there. And a lot of that clan society exists today. And I'm gonna show you a funny, interesting picture here in a moment. So this is your pioneer, and he's arrived in Madison County, Alabama. He came down the Great Wagon Road, then he turned and went down the Wilderness Road through Virginia, and he found his way into the Tennessee Valley. And these wagons there, Contesco wagons, were built in Philadelphia. And they were the semi-truck of the day. They could haul heavy loads, and I read that sometimes they'd have 6 big draft horses pulling these wagons. They were heavily loaded with tons of merchandise in some cases. You know, maybe they brought their plow, because you can't buy a plow here when you get here. What else would they have brought? Seed for planting their first crops. They brought the necessities. They brought their Bible. So that's who they were. And, you know, I can just see her. She's arrived and she said, "Where's my house?" You know, lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. Well, there weren't any tigers, but there were lions and bears, of course. And by the way, in Kentucky, you probably know there were buffalo. And I mentioned 172 Revolutionary War veterans are interred are here in Madison County, we think. How did they get their land? How did anybody get title to the land? Well, during the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812, the government gave land grants to the veterans, many of them. The early people that came down just came in and took land. Sometimes they were squatters. And John Rankins taught me a lot about that. They came in to Indian territory and they were squatters. And there were cases where the United States government had to remove them because they were not allowed to be there. So just picture in your mind, you've made that 10-week trip and there you are, you're home. How did they even find their land? That's a question I have. They have a deed, but I'm sure that the land wasn't surveyed and easy to locate. So one of John Rankin's articles that he did talks about Eleanor Gray, who married William Gray. And John, feel free to, if you want to say a few words, but she was from royalty in Scotland. And you talk about how she the greatest feat he probably ever accomplished was talking her into coming into the wilderness. So that's quite an interesting story. Now let's talk about the Revolutionary War. And I mentioned to you that these Scots-Irish people were in the mountains, and they were very independent. They were stubborn. They were clan-oriented, and the British had Colonel Ferguson, and Colonel Ferguson was tasked to go into the mountains and get rid of these rebels, get rid of these Scot-Irish people that were causing so much trouble. So he was hunting them. He was hunting them. Well, he didn't know, but they were hunting him. And they found him at a place called Kings Mountain in North Carolina near the Virginia state line today. And that was the Battle of Kings Mountain, and it turned the tide in the war, because at that time the war was going very bad for America, very bad. So as I say here, he introduced the redcoats to a whole new way of fighting, guerrilla warfare. So they attacked him on Kings Mountain. The top of the mountain is only 6 or 8 acres. The redcoats had 1,300 soldiers. The Scots-Irish frontiermen had about half that, and they decimated the redcoats, and they killed Ferguson. Ferguson had sent word to them that he was going to hang every leader and burn everyone's house. They didn't like that, so they came after him. And that battle turned the tide in the war. After that battle, there were other battles like Cowpens that went in our favor. And what I read was it changed the tide in the war. So I mentioned that the Scot-Irish Presbyterians had a deep-seated resentment toward British authority. They were some of the first to call for independence. And interesting here, I read that if you offend an Englishman, he'll sue you. If you offend a Scot-Irish man, he'll kill you. And 40% of the Revolutionary War veterans were Scot-Irish, and Scot-Irish have led in all of America's battles. It goes, the American heroes, it just goes on and on and on. Scot-Irish people. Okay, that's my cousin with the mustache. And in 1921, he was murdered at the train station in Knox County, Kentucky. He got in the middle of a family feud, and he was killed. And so that's an example of how that Scot-Irish clan society was then, and it's still that way in a lot of respects today. What's that on the floor beside him? Who knows? Spittoon. I don't see a spittoon in my barber shop. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. So when they came here, Alabama was not a state, right? Alabama becomes a state in 1819, and they're coming in 20 years before, and they're coming into what we call the Big Bend area. The Big Bend is what we call, the Tennessee River comes down from Chattanooga, and it turns back up, and it eventually goes to back up into Tennessee to Paducah, the Big Bend. And they came in the wagons I mentioned earlier. Imagine that wagon. Got 4 horses there. What are those horses going to eat on the way down? They have to eat. I have so many questions, that these people overcame obstacles that just hard to believe. Speaking of the Tennessee River, I think it's 593 miles long. And I have a survey that the Tennessee Valley Authority did in 1915. They surveyed all the cemeteries that potentially could have been flooded when they built the dams. And we have that survey today. We're doing work other cemeteries like Mooresville. We'll be in Mooresville The 28th of this month, Saturday, will be our 11th year to work that cemetery. Come out and join us if you can. But we have that survey that includes Mooresville Cemetery. Mooresville Cemetery is a large cemetery, 500 people. Most of it is in the woods. You can't see any of the graves anymore. So I mentioned the Madison County Cemetery Rehabilitation Authority. Here they are. They're a volunteer organization. Alabama code permits any county to have a cemetery authority. Madison County is really fortunate, first, to have one, and second, we are super fortunate to have the people that we have. And again, Cindy and Benny are on it. John was an earlier member of that, right? And so these people you see here, they're just fantastic, and they're great to work with. And they have knowledge and expertise in a lot of areas. I know Cindy is key in getting cemeteries registered as historic cemeteries, right? And would I put you on the spot to ask you, what's the value in that? How is it done? And how many have been registered in Madison County? I mean, a designation as a historic cemetery accomplishes what, Cindy?
Basically, you're establishing the ancestors that came here to live, preserving their history, basically.
Okay.
So, and we have over 30 cemeteries registered with the Alabama Historical Commission.
And there's a lot of work in getting that done. She interacts with the state, and she's a pro at getting that done.
And John Rankin has been very, very helpful in a lot of these historical records that we have obtained from him in registering these cemeteries, and we commend him for his efforts and continued efforts that he does with the Madison County Cemetery.
Okay, thank you. So that's our cemetery authority. Okay. Early Madison County pioneer cemeteries, and this is not a complete list. These cemeteries, almost all of them, have been worked by the Sons of American Revolution, Lee Hadbow's organization, the Sons of Confederate Veterans, has been maintaining cemeteries decades, right, Lee? Decades. They're out all the time. One thing they do, and Benny's organization does it also, if a veteran's grave is found and there's not a stone, they work with the Veterans Administration to get a new VA stone. It can be a vertical stone, or it can be a stone that lays on the ground. And my recollection, my knowledge of the cemeteries with Revolutionary War veterans or Confederate veterans are listed here. I could have missed a couple of those. And there are probably 30, 40 other cemeteries that could be on that list. Here in Madison, okay, you know the Mexican restaurant near the intersection of Hughes Road and Madison Pike? You probably know it on the south side of Madison Pike. Right behind there is the Kemper Cemetery. Pull around back of that sometime. Small cemetery, it's got veterans in it. Another, Farley Cemetery, isn't Farley in Madison, John? Or am I wrong there?
It's in my backyard.
Across from Miller Plaza?
Yeah.
Right. That's a pretty good sized cemetery. They're all over. I mean, I'm from here. And after I met these guys, they're showing me cemeteries just off all these roads that I never knew existed. There are a lot of cemeteries.
Even the Pike Sanderson Cemetery.
But most cemeteries are what? They're small family cemeteries that families in the 1700s or 1800s, they lived on the farm. They had a death in the family, and they buried their family member right out on the farm. So those are everywhere. Many of them are gone. Many of them have been lost. We're going to talk about that in a second. So, you're first or second generation Madison County resident. You came here as a pioneer, or your parents did. And then what's ahead of you? The War of 1812, statehood in 1819, the Mexican-American War that we don't think a lot about or talk a lot about. Alabama had 2 battalions and 3 companies that fought in that war. And then the Civil War came. So the pioneers have been removed from their family for 40 years. In 1860, Madison County population was less than 38,000. And these people have been removed from their families in Pennsylvania or Maryland or wherever. And then sadly, you know, they end up fighting each other. So they're fighting their cousins, you know, in the north. It's a sad thing. So the South was invaded, of course. Wars prosecuted on the civilian population. Towns were burned here in Madison County. Huntsville was occupied, and part of that resistance was Frank Gurley. His family, the town of Gurley's named after. And there was so much death. In Murfreesboro, Tennessee, 100 miles from here, there were 51,000 casualties in one battle. No, 31,000 casualties there of Southern boys and men. So I'm going to talk about 5 or 6 cemeteries individually here now. The first one I have come up is Gray Cemetery, also known as Betts Cemetery, or it's Betts Cemetery, also known as Gray Cemetery. Okay, there are about 500 graves there. It's about 5 acres. It's here in Madison off Balch Road. Some of the veterans we know that are in Madison cemeteries, in different cemeteries in Madison, are listed here. Some of the names you see there are longtime Madison family names. I went to school with some of these people, the Whitworths, the Tribbles, others. And undoubtedly, many veterans are in cemeteries that haven't been found yet. So long as we have John Rankin, we're going to be finding more. Why do we lose cemeteries? Neglect, abandonment, vandalism, construction. Of course, we see what's happening all around us today. And sometimes we hear of a cemetery that's been found on a construction site, and folks get active and save it. But you know, we don't hear about the ones that the developer never tells us about, right? And so one thing I've given thought to, John and Benny, is the city planning and zoning for every city should have, and they go through a methodical process for approving subdivisions. They should have, and maybe they do, but I don't think they do, they should have a box to check on cemeteries. The property is free of cemeteries. I had a talk with Madison Planning and Zoning about a year ago, and I didn't really understand what they do. But they're the ones on the front line that approve subdivisions, and they're the ones to certify that there's not a cemetery there. Livestock, cattle and goats can really damage a cemetery. Tree roots. I showed you a photograph of Cornelius Cemetery, the one that had the large stones in it, and tree roots have just turned the stones, haven't they, Benny? And then adverse possession is, I won't even go into that. I'm not an attorney, but people end up getting ownership and title to a cemetery that's not really theirs. And part of the way they do that is they start paying taxes on it for a period of time, then they claim it. So you may know a cemetery near you. Get curious about it. Go out and walk in it. maybe adopt it. And if you, have any of you used Find a Grave online? findagrave.com? Okay, very few of you. Go to findagrave.com. You can, all cemeteries are pretty much on Find a Grave with the people that are buried in them. It's completely a volunteer organization. And if you find a cemetery with your family in it, you can go to Find a Grave for that cemetery, and you can put information about your loved one in that cemetery, on Find a Grave. So here we are. This is in Limestone County on the left. And that's Lee Hannibal, who is, his camp is cleaning this cemetery. Lee, what cemetery is this?
Can't remember what the name of it was. It's a small family cemetery. It's off of Woolly Springs Road, out north of, go 251 toward Ardmore. It's on Woolly Springs Road. I can't remember the name of the family cemetery over there. It sits in somebody's backyard.
So Lee's camp has 3 ring binders for different sections of the county, and they assign different individuals to watch over cemeteries in certain parts of the county. So I have the binder for southeast Limestone County, and I watch over those cemeteries. And Mooresville is one, and again, we'll be out there on the 28th of this month. There are about a dozen or more in that part of the county. Beautiful cemeteries, and some of these very old cemeteries, you've seen the obelisk, you know, the tall obelisk. You gotta wonder, how could they get that 1,000-pound stone in the cemetery 130 years ago? But they did, and they did it with a wagon and a horse. And then here's Cindy on the right, working one of the cemeteries that she works. So how do we learn about the people that are in the cemeteries? How do we determine there are people in a cemetery that where there are no gravestones? Well, it takes a lot of research. And there are 3 individuals who are no longer with us who did phenomenal work years ago in cemeteries doing research. They documented Dorothy Scott Johnson, Pauline Jones Granler, and Dr. Francis Roberts. Dr. Francis Roberts was famous at UAH, right, John? What was her position there? Over the history department?
Yes.
So they produced all this information, and of course, John Rankin is still with us, and he's right there in the category with them. The amount of work that John has done. I told you that you read his article in the Madison County Record. 557 folders. He's worked on 6 cemeteries in 6 states. His material is 158 gigabytes. It just goes on and on. I've seen John's material. And on the right, then, is an example of the work that Dorothy Scott Johnson did on Gray Cemetery. John, when did she do that? Do you know?
She probably inventoried it in the 1950s, but she wrote her volume 1 of the book, which is in this library, in 1970 something, 71 maybe.
Okay.
And she's got 3 volumes in print now. She died before volume 3 was in print. And I have volume 4 in my computer that
Use your
my
mic.
son gave to me.
Can you use your mic?
I was just saying that there's a volume 4 that I have that she never got to finish. She didn't compile it. But I was given access to her computer after her death. So I copied it all. It's never been published. But basically she covered the entire county in 4 volumes. So volume 1 is mostly the western part of Madison County. Volume 2 is the northeast, 3 is the south.
So when you do the research, you're looking at census records, civil and criminal court records, land deeds, land titles. You're looking at veterans' pensions. You're taking all this data and you're pulling it together.
There's another very unusual source that most people never heard of. If you do a lot of courthouse records research, this county had a county commission court meeting. County commissioners documented what they asked the population to do. So there's many volumes that I have digitized of county commissioners court records that tell which landowner had to establish a road through his property and who was in charge of the poor people in his area. All these things are in those books. Fantastic amount of data, including where they were, where they lived along the road.
And many of these records are archived in Newmarket? New
Owens Crossroads.
Owens Crossroads.
But I don't know if the county commissioner's court books are there. They probably are. Circuit court kept all the circuit court records are kept on the 3rd floor of the Huntsville main library. It used to have all of them, but they took all the non-circuit court stuff to a huge warehouse in Owens Crossroad. It's just past the Waffle House as you go south from Hampton Cove. They've got 2 very sharp guys running it that know everything. So I go to them when I need help.
So what I want you to take away here is the amount of research that's been done. The difficulty of the research, you have to know what you're doing. And the number of people, these 4 people, and there are others that have done this research and documented. So we have that today. We can build on that today. And we go to that. I mentioned Cornelius Cemetery earlier. It was on the first slide. So here's Benny working this. And if you know Bob Wade Lane, before he gets to Pulaski Pike, that's an industrial area there. And to the north of Bob Wade Lane is a massive solar complex. It's behind a Huntsville utility substation. Right behind that substation is the cemetery. And surrounded on 3 sides is 100 or more acres of solar panels. The cemetery's on a hill. I've been there one time. Benny's made many trips there working with his team. And just a lot of the stones that are laid and overturned there are from a wall that's a perimeter in the cemetery. So it just amazes me that how they got those stones there, how they built that. So this is one of several refurbishment projects that Benny has going now. And you see the green vine there, and we see this in all cemeteries, pretty much all cemeteries. Vinca minor was planted by the pioneers in these cemeteries because it's a ground cover. Yeah, Vinca minor. It's also called graveyard vine or a periwinkle. Have any of you seen that in a cemetery? I'm sure you have. Yeah. Okay. Well, here they are working. This is just a shot of another cemetery. John Rankins found a stone, and speaking of stones, many gravestones are just under the surface, right? 200 years, 150 years of fallen leaves. A cow knocks the stone over, the leaves cover, and they're below surface. So we found several just by probing.
Gilbert, bounce back to the Cornelius Cemetery briefly. We did some, because of the damage in that cemetery, we couldn't really get a good understanding of why in the world, or how could all these big stones and stuff be really rolled around, and it is actually in such terrible shape. I mean, even vandals would have had it, they wouldn't work that hard to try to mess it up that bad. But, there's, in the midst of all this, there's, at least 4 box tombs that we're working on rebuilding. We've got 2 of them rebuilt so far. But we did, one of the guys that I'm working with is a former professor at UAH, and he's actually doing a chronological, I guess he's putting together a timeline as we're working the cemetery. He's recording all this information. He's taken 700-800 pictures so far. He's planning on putting a book together for this particular cemetery. And part of the research that we went back and looked at is he went back and looked at the weather patterns, and we did find out that this particular cemetery was in a direct line of 2 major tornadoes that went through this area back. I guess I can refer to someone who knows a whole lot more about the weather than I do. But I'm thinking one of them was in the 70s, and one back in the even earlier than that. But we're thinking now that a lot of that damage in that cemetery was, there's a very good indication that it was probably tornado damage.
So a tornado blows a tree over, a big tree, and the root ball comes up and breaks its nose.
Besides the big tree crashing down across the box tombs and the headstones, you get the root ball popping up, and I mean, trees are gotta be one of the worst things in a cemetery.
When did your group start working the cemetery?
It's been almost a year now. I think maybe 10 months, 11 months, something like that.
Okay.
But it's quite a chore, and we're starting to primarily get all the graves taken care of first, and then once we get the graves in place, we'll go back and try to start rebuilding the wall. And we're a little bit worried about lifting those 300-pound rocks with just some manpower, nothing else to help us other than boards and.
You have to learn the old-fashioned way, build your thing with a lever pole.
Yeah, we've done some pretty ingenious moves in some of these cemeteries to get stuff moved around. But at any rate, I just wanted to make that comment about Cornelius. And it is really strange when you look at the sky view or earth view of the cemetery, whereas they have totally built these solar panel fields all around and left this one little mound, which sitting right in the middle of all these solar panels. You get a chance, just.
Well, like most cemeteries, it was built on a hill, right?
Yeah, and this is a very small mound that was apparently farmed all around too. And but they left a little 25-foot right of way that goes in between the fences to get back to the cemetery. But all you can see around the whole cemetery is nothing but solar panels.
Thank you, Benny. Next one, please. Okay, here's one of the Sons of American Revolution honor ceremonies they have. Once they finish the cemetery, get it where they want it, then they come in with their color guard. This is great to watch this. This is the Donaldson Cemetery near Hazel Green. Okay. Here's another one. If you know Rollin, if you know the Shiloh Church there, there's cemetery on the south, cemetery on the north, cemetery across the road. They're different cemeteries. This cemetery, and when I say south, maybe it's catty corner. This is a Jordan cemetery where Benny and his organization had an honorary ceremony, I think about a year ago.
Yeah, it's been
And,
almost 2 years.
So if you haven't attended one of those, and if you see an announcement of it, they're great to attend.
You do get to listen to the musket firing, because that's part of the ceremony. Our group does do a musket salute at every ceremony.
Benny mentioned box tombs. Here's an example of box tombs. And actually, Benny rebuilt these on a hot summer day with 2 or 3 men. I remember going and seeing those guys were down in the mud and dirt. So the top of the tomb is the gravestone, and everything surrounding you rebuilt, right, Benny? The vertical?
Right, usually, in most cases, we have to dig them out of the ground first, end pieces, the side pieces, and we're pretty lucky on these. We're not broken up too bad. I have one now that I'm working over in, it's the Wise Cemetery just south of Decatur. The Wise Cemetery just south of Decatur. And the top of that, the top or the tabletop that sits on the box tomb is probably in about 50 pieces. And so I'm trying to bend it together in sections right now so that I can get it put back on top. I've got the sidewalls built, but and some of these box tombs, the tabletops on them, these are thinner ones than a lot we worked with. We've calculated the weight on some of them to be anywhere between 1,300 and 1,700 pounds. And again, when you're out in the cemetery with nothing but boards and logs, and it's sometimes a little difficult to get those up on
Of course, the body's not in the box, right? The body's far below ground. Okay, thank you, Benny. Here's another cemetery, rebuilding brick tombs before and after. That's a lot of work there.
Is that a Gray Cemetery? Was that a picture?
The picture was at Gray.
Is that a Gray Cemetery?
It is. So I mentioned the Karen tombs, and there are some huge elaborate ones that you'll see online if you look at Scotland and Ireland, massive big tombs. But often what's encountered here in Madison County, and I'm thinking of the Larkinsville Cemetery in Jackson County. It has a number of those. I've never been there. I've seen photographs of it. But looking at it, you would just think, well, it's a pile of limestone rock. But no, it's a cemetery. And the cattle have got in there or whatever and knocked the stones over. Okay? An example of a restoration of a brick wall in a family plot. Okay. So those are the cemeteries I wanted to show you. I want to give you an opportunity to ask any questions before I ask Jim Chamberlain to say a couple of words about Madison Greenway and Trail. So from what we've covered so far tonight, do you have any questions or comments?
I've got a question. And this may be for John or Benny. When was Gray Cemetery rediscovered?
Sorry, what was the question?
When was Gray Cemetery rediscovered?
It depends on who you recognize as having rediscovered it. It was never lost to some people.
Okay.
For me personally, I first encountered it in 1996. one of the pictures showed Patsy Spencer Ryan. She took me there and I thought it was her cemetery. But she told me she'd ridden a horse through it every day for years. And she didn't know it was a cemetery. She couldn't see anything, just vines and weeds and trees. But when I saw it, I recognized there's a cemetery under these vines.
And so follow-up question on bulk storage is right there.
Yeah, but
Is
you've
it-
got to recognize that if you go back to 1920, Pauline Jones Gandred sent people to cemeteries all over the state. They inventoried the Gray Cemetery. They knew it was there in 1920. Dot Johnson inventoried it. I've got 2 pages of the grave listings that Dot Johnson made in the 50s and published in 1970. So when was it rediscovered? I don't know. Gene Haley's sitting with us. He
So
knows when he
my-
first saw it.
My follow-on question is, when they built bulk storage, is it likely they interred, graves?
Whatever may have been done is done,
I know,
and
but I'm
we
just.
can't do anything
No,
about it.
I agree that, I was just curious.
Yes, yes. Introduce yourself.
I own that, and have for a while. It's been in the family a long time. And when I bought storage, I got engineers out here, I got everybody I can find to come out here. I've got a plot of what was decided in, I'm gonna say 94, as to where that cemetery is. Couldn't find no records of where it is. We went out there and worked on it, trying to locate. And in 98, at the courthouse, there was 1.74 designated. I done it, had the engineering work done, had it all recorded as that's the cemetery. Now, the lines we used is outside of where the graves that was on the property that I owned. That cemetery is actually further south than what the records show. In 98 or 94, Madison Water put a water line through that. Rather than going through the cemetery, they went north, parallel to the road, went to the north side of Boss Road self-storage, and then come back south, and then went across to the east. And we got everybody we could get to come out there and designate where it's at, all right? I got the engineering people to go outside of where the supposed cemetery was, and I set aside 1.74 acres. It's about probably at least 50 to 70 foot east of where the storage place is, trying to make sure it got safe. If you go to the courthouse, that piece of property that was set aside is recorded on a separate deed where it can't be touched. Now that cemetery is laying south of where the records show, by somewhere in the neighborhood, I figure 50 to 80 feet. It was on Betts' property at the time. Part of it was on Betts, part of it was on what the Gray owned. And it's some discussion going on now about it, but that cemetery ain't going nowhere from where it's at. I'll tell you that.
Shane, thank you for that. Thank you.
What was the
Okay.
purpose of the box tomb?
It's a marker for the grave.
Well, I know it's a marker for a grave,
Why did they
but
do a box?
Right.
Why did they do a box?
A lot of time, most of the time, once, these pioneers, put their family members in the ground. We had a lot of issues with animals, digging around especially. So, some you put stone over the graves, some put brick over the graves, some wanted to be more decorative and built it's basically a small monument to the grave underneath. John may have some more knowledge to
But sometimes the rock gets so hard under there, you can't dig 4 or 5 feet. So you have to go above ground. In New Orleans, it's the opposite.
Right, yeah. But, it's, I think in my mind, and I don't know whether there's any real true or any definition anywhere that's written of why but to me, it's basically serves 2 purposes. One, it protects the area underneath where the box tomb is from animals getting into it. It provides a certain amount of protection. Animals are pretty shrewd. They can get around and dig back through, and we've seen that all over. But the other thing is it does provide something a little more than a tombstone to recognize or to memorialize the person that's in there. And it's a cheaper way than, you know, a lot of times now people have these real nice monuments made up by these monument companies. You know, we didn't really have, back when these folks were buried, most of the time it was chisel and hammer, and a box tomb was a nice little decoration to use. So I can't offer any more explanation than that.
Yeah, I was wondering, are the bricks a regional thing? Because I've seen box tombs in other states, but I've never seen the bricks before.
Right, bricks. It's very uncommon in this area, but most of these were the slave-made bricks that were made up, I guess, here in the area, and put in place. I think with all the cemeteries that I've been working around, and it's been several around, not only just in Madison County, but Morgan, Limestone, St. Clair. This is my first exposure to the brick-covered tombs and the brick walls. I had not seen that before. So in this cemetery, it's pretty unique. Do you have anything to add to that, John?
Not really. The brick here in the Gray Cemetery is the most common. There are some on the Redstone Arsenal for the same reason. That redstone comes from the name of the clay. It's red clay. And the people that had slaves in the early days, they'd build a little box the size of a brick out of wood planks, pack it with red clay, set it in the sun for a summer, and it's a brick. And it's still lasting intact as a brick 200 years later if a tree didn't fall over it. So it was a readily available funerary system. I think people used common sense in those days. I wish we could do that today more often. So, yeah, they buried the best way they could, and box tombs make sense when you don't want to dig real deep. The old rule of thumb was 6 feet deep. That doesn't work in some soils. You go down 2 feet if you're lucky. Use the dirt on top. Animals don't have to dig very deep to get to the corpse. So you put a box tomb around it if you have time and money to do it.
All right, thank you both. Any other questions on cemeteries? Anything we've talked about before Jim Chamberlain comes up? And get the mic, Jim, if you would. Any other questions? Jim Chamberlain is the leader of Madison Greenways and Trails. They've been doing work for many years. It's great to help them sometimes, and they have helped us with cemetery cleaning. So, Jim, tell us about your organization and all the fun you have.
Thank you, Gil, and you all may wonder why we're here tonight, but there are about 10 of us here from our group. We have a lot in common with the cemetery folks, the history folks. They're trying to preserve the history of our area, and we're trying to preserve the green space of our area and provide places for folks to walk, hike, and bike. And I do want to mention that I'm very thrilled that we have a new leader for MG&T who is here tonight, Michael Goodman. So we're growing and getting new folks involved, and we're very happy about that. We're a nonprofit, been working with the city for about 25 years now. If you enjoy Bradford Creek Greenway, that was one of the first efforts that we helped the city and the land trust with. And more recently, we've been doing a lot of work at Rainbow Mountain Preserve, which is owned by the city and managed by the land trust with our help. Now, as has been mentioned, Madison's just developing so quickly, rapidly. We're now one of the most urban cities in the state. You know, we really need to be preserving our history and our green space, remaining green space. So we're very pleased that just a mile west of here is one of the last big city-owned properties, which is in the area between Wall-Triana and Balch on the east and west, and Gillespie and Browns Ferry on the south. There's about 60 acres of property there owned by the city, the land trust, and the Bet Spring itself owned by Madison Utilities. So this has been on the city planning documents since 2006. This area should become a nature preserve with hiking trails and also an extension of the Greenway from where it ends now, the Mill Creek Greenway, where it ends at Browns Ferry, and come all the way up to Wall-Triana near the pre-K school. So this is a major effort, and we're thrilled the city's getting started in it. And so I'd ask you to do three things. Consider signing up for the Madison Greenways and Trails newsletter, and we've got a sign-up sheet back there. And we also have a nice map we've done of places to walk, hike, and bike in Madison. In the back there, if you want to take a look at that. I'd encourage you to join the Land Trust of North Alabama. They are the conservation organization in our area with almost 100 miles of trails now and 10,000 acres of property. So if you want to help quality of life, preserve our area's green space, great organization. And the third thing is talk to Madison city officials. They are supporting this new preserve, you know, with small amounts getting started, but we'd love to see this take shape and come to completion in the next few years. And the area we're working right now is over in the northwest corner, which is just adjacent to the Betts Gray Cemetery. It's going to be a great destination to go learn some history and take a walk in the woods. So we're just thrilled to be partnering with Gil and John and Benny and all in developing this new area in town.
Okay, there's a second slide.
All right, yes. And so here's a map. Then south side, Browns Ferry, north side, keep going up a little, it would be Gillespie, left side, Balch, right side, Wall-Triana. You see in the upper left-hand corner, Balch Storage, and behind it, the gray Betts Cemetery. And then in the corner there, those yellow lines, that's basically the concept for the trail that we're now building. And
that's on whose property?
That's City of Madison property. And then Betts Springs is in the middle, the blue area that belongs to Madison Utilities. And then the right side is a combination of city, land trust, and Madison Utilities property on the right. And then you see coming down to the bottom left, that's the Mill Creek watershed. And down here in the corner is the existing Mill Creek Greenway, that paved greenway that ends right at north of Browns Ferry. So building the trails is kind of the easier part of this. And you know, we've got this trail that we hope to complete this summer right next to the Betts Gray Cemetery. And longer term, that orange line would be a paved boardwalk, crushed limestone path that would take you over to Wall Triana. And what this does, it connects the west side of town, where we have things like Bradford Creek Greenway, with the east side of town, where we have Wall Triana Path, Hughes Road Path, and so forth. So this is really going to connect the city together for walking and biking.
Thank you, Jim. All the best with your retirement from Madison Greenway and Trail. No, you won't be.
Well, I'm in charge of the new trail development, but we've got a nice board they got so much work to do.
He's the vice president. He stepped down from being president to vice president.
Okay, it's 7:03. That's all I have. We can stay a few more minutes. Again, if you have questions, just put them out there. Thank you very much for coming. If you're interested in speaking on a topic, let us know. Thank you.